Blood on the Moon from 1948 was directed by Robert Wise and starred Robert Mitchum, a guy who is basically born to play the role of that morally dark and mysterious cowboy character. One who just wants to ride through, but ends up getting drawn into a world of trouble and intrigue. The film was excellent. It's not just the acting, but the visuals and music of this film as well make it one of the finest westerns I've ever seen. Really enjoyed this film a lot. Film opens up, and we have Robert Mitchum plays the character Jim Gary. He's a cowboy just riding along on a rainy night. He's setting up camp for the evening, and he's ready to snooze when some cattle come stampeding through, causing him to climb up a tree. Now, he eventually makes his way back down, finds his way to a nearby camp, and meets with the character Tom Tully, played by actor John Lufton. And, although Jim just kind of wants to ride on his way, he agrees to help out with delivering a note to a nearby rancher family. And as Jim gets close to the place, he gets shot at by a woman who we find out is Lufton's daughter, Amy, played by actress Barbara Bel Geddes. Well, Jim eventually gets the note to the Lufton's estate. He brings it to the eldest daughter, Carol. It's played by actress Phyllis Thaxter, who to me was noteworthy because she also played Ma Kent in the 1978 Superman film as well. That was pretty cool. Well, he soon meets with this character, Tate, actor Robert Preston. He's kind of this sketchy-looking old friend who seems to know him pretty well from the past. The two of them are old buddies. Tate explains that his true plan is to force Lufton to sell his herd to a guy named Pindalist that he's working with at an inflated rate. Cattle rustling, starting to feel like a Hopalong Cassidy film here, but anyhow, Jim agrees reluctantly, and the next day, Carol and Amy ride to meet their dad at the place from the note. Now, when they arrive, however, they're met by Tate, Jim, and his crew. Amy reveals that their father deliberately wrote the wrong location on the note. She angrily tells these guys off, and she and her sister leave. Well, soon as Amy informs Lufton about Jim, Tate and his crew, they start this big stampede. And during this, one of Lufton's cowboys gets trampled to death, and another guy gets shot. Well, Jim is kind of depressed about all of this, and he has to go and inform Fred's father, Chris, about his son's death. Chris, by the way, is played by legendary Walter Brennan, who just has that grisly old look of an ancient cowhand. He's really perfect in this film. Jim heads to town and saves Lufton when he's almost killed by some of Tate's men. And yeah, this plot was a little more complex than I was expecting, and as Lufton himself says, I just don't get it. Well, that was me trying to follow this story, but who cares? It's a great film and it's beautifully made. Well, Amy apologizes to Jim, and Jim clears out of town and he travels across some gorgeous scenery. It's one of the noteworthy things about this film. He shows up at a cantina, and he's just going to have a few drinks, and then Tate meets with him. And he wants Jim to make the purchase offer to Lufton. Jim at this point has had it. He refuses, and this leads to some angry words, and the two guys get into a big fist fight with each other until Jim finally knocks Tate out. Now, a bad guy shows up, and he's about to shoot Jim, who himself is heavily beaten up at this point. But Chris shows up at the last minute and saves him, but then tells him to get out. Jim goes to see Amy, who helps tend to his wounds. And just a side note, I think Amy resembles actress Anna Paquin from those X-Men movies. Anyhow, Lufton shows up, and Jim suggests to him that he can help barter with his character Pindalist. Lufton doesn't buy it, so Jim leaves in a huff, but Amy pursues after him and convinces him to meet with Pindalist. And there's also, of course, the romantic element starting to develop between her and him. So sure enough, Jim meets with Pindalist Frank Phelan, who I caught not long ago in the film Convicted with Glenn Ford. And soon, Jim reveals his scheme. He's going to hold Pindalist captive until Lufton has rounded up his cattle. But soon there's a big snowstorm. Jim is attacked by some Indians and he flees. And he winds up hiding out at Chris's ranch when Amy goes to help him. And of course, they declare their love for each other. And soon enough, the bad guys all arrive and there's a big old shootout. And as we near the end of the film, no more spoilers, but what will happen? Will Jim survive? Will he and Amy have a future together? What will happen to these cattle rustlers? Well, you gotta watch the film for yourself to find out. Some quick closing thoughts. Blood on the Moon was directed by Robert Wise. I've really come to appreciate direction from directors like this. It's a very careful attention to detail that I really appreciate. You watch a lot of films today, in its frenzied jump cuts and that obnoxious shaky cam stuff. And I'm really starting to admire directors who give that careful, attentive detail to direction. And I've actually seen a number of Robert Wise's movies and reviewed them on this channel, including The Haunting, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Run Silent, Run Deep. All great movies. In fact, one day I will probably get to Star Trek the Motion Picture. I'm actually thinking about reviewing the first 6 of the Star Trek films. But I wonder, do they really count as old movies? I don't know. It was interesting to read about Robert Wise's direction for the fight scene in this film with Jim and Tate. This isn't like a fancy, clean fight. But from what I was reading about the scene, he really wanted it to look like an authentic fight with, a brutal violence to it, which, when it was over, the winner looks just as exhausted as the loser. And, some of the background about this from Lee Server's bio of Robert Mitchum says that these weren't stunt doubles, but these were both of the actors just going at it. And it's impressive for the realism. It's one of the better fight scenes I've seen in a film, and it's honestly what you would expect to see if 2 cowboys were duking it out. There was some very nice, majestic music for this film by Roy Webb, and it really pairs well with the beautiful cinematography. The film looks and feels authentic, only occasionally veering into a studio look. And a lot of credit, again, to Robert Wise for just the realism here. It's a gorgeously made film, and as mentioned, Robert Mitchum just has that edgy, jaded look of a cowboy legend. He's really perfect here. Anyhow, that's Blood on the Moon from 1948. Those are just my thoughts in this review. I thought it was an amazing Western, and it's one that's worth checking out.